pronouns, relating all the different variations on the internet and Wikipedia to various different gender identities, along with a pronunciation guide. Going into the background and culture surrounding them could be interesting as well. So a disclaimer before we start. I'm a first language English speaker from Canada. I have French second language, but I've not studied this topic in French. This answer deals only with English pronouns. I'm really sorry. I'm probably going to do some research to figure out what other languages are doing, but if you know anything about alternative pronouns in other languages, please talk about it in the comments. I'd love to read about it. So, I'm going to assume you're asking about alternative pronouns, given our cultural familiarity with he and she. The absolute most common alternative pronoun for that non-binary folks use, that I know of, is one no English speaker should be unfamiliar with: they. Some folks will have never used they as a gender-neutral third-person singular, and only as a third-person plural, but it's been being used in this fashion since at least Chaucer's era. It's also been recorded in the writings of Shakespeare and C.S. Lewis, among many, many others. They is the best pronoun to use for someone whose pronouns you don't know. It's also a common choice for non-binary folks as a preferred pronoun. From here on out, your question gets a little tough. Some pronunciations change drastically based on where the speaker is from. I speak with a Western Canadian accent, so keep that in mind when I'm saying some of these. They might be said differently by people from different parts of the English-speaking world. I'm also not going to go through every single possible pronoun. Even to just go through the ones on Wikipedia would take longer than people are probably willing to listen to me for. So if I want to include history and use. And this video is already going to be on the long side. I'll give some information about the most common ones, and provide pronunciation for the ones I'm aware of the pronunciation for. None of these pronouns actually has a specific and single gender identity attached to it, like he and she do. He is for boys and she is for girls, but Z could be used equally by a trans-masculine person as for an agender person. I'm sure there's some research paper to be had in there, which non-binary identities use which pronouns more, but it's not one that's already built into our culture, and that's part of the point. If these pronouns were as specific as he and she already are, they wouldn't be as useful as alternative pronouns or chosen pronouns, because they would already have as much weight and baggage as he and she do, and that's part of the problem with he and she. They mean one specific thing, and that thing only. If they meant more than one thing, I suspect more non-binary folks would feel more comfortable using them. Moving on to the pronouns. Z. Also Z, or Z, or Z. This, as far as I'm aware, is the most common of the neo-pronouns. It sounds like it belongs in English. It follows the same pattern as the extant pronouns: she, her, hers, z, zir, zirs. Some variants use z, here, hers. The spelling z, S-I-E, comes from the German pronoun of the same spelling. It's the formal you when capitalized, as well as the third-person feminine singular and the third-person plural. There's been some discussion around the source and use of z as is originally a feminine pronoun, and could hypothetically be pronounced like she. The here variant also has similar discussion surrounding it. See, she, she. This is a common spelt one, having been an early attempt at making written language more gender inclusive, and also, I suspect, to avoid writing out he or she over and over and over again. Again, it follows the same forms as binary pronouns: he, him, his, she, him, her, his, her. Some choose to put parentheses, some prefer the slash. Again, there's a lot of discussion around this one, primarily whether it's actually gender neutral, as it makes the masculine form look like the standard and the feminine the derivative. Those two are basically the two most common ones, and also the ones that are the hardest to pronounce if you're unfamiliar with them and reading them for the first time. A couple more pronunciations of the ones that are written on Wikipedia are am heirs, per, thon, which uses a G for thong, self, who, and J. J is a really interesting one to pronounce. It's the one with the most variant pronunciations. It could also be pronounced Z, like Z that we've already gone over, or G, or Z, or Xi. If you're unsure about someone's pronouns, and they're not someone you feel comfortable asking, use they. It's easy and it's already a part of our language in a way that won't make people ask questions. If someone does tell you their pronouns and you're not familiar with them, either look them up online or ask them right there and then. That way the conversation has been had, and you can move on to actually talking to each other like human beings. matter what I've said here today regarding the discussion about the history and use of these pronouns, if someone tells you I use ze, her, hers, do not then tell her that those pronouns are actually feminine pronouns and really ze should change to a more no. No. Do not do this thing. Accept and respect everyone's pronouns, no matter what they look like, no matter what you think of those pronouns. Finally, if you're having trouble getting a handle on a specific set of pronouns, you can't remember which one goes where, or when, or why, try writing a paragraph or two. Write about the person whose pronouns you're trying to get a hold of. Describe them and get used to writing "her eyes are blue" instead of "her eyes are blue." It's like learning a new language. It takes practice, but soon you'll find that it's easier than you thought. And you've just met my cat.